Hello, hi everyone. Usually, Sunil Uncle starts this, through an introduction and setting the tone. However, I believe he has some device issues. If some of you or one of you could just confirm to me on chat that you being able to see me and hear me, then I will start, and Sunil Uncle will eventually join in. Okay, okay. So I have received a lot of confirmations that people can see and hear me. Also, given the fact that you can't talk on the call, that's a reason for the message confirmation. So, good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well, keeping safe. Your families are safe as well. As I just mentioned, usually it's Sunil Uncle who starts this entire forum. He sets the tone, he gives an introduction, and then we get into the book review. However, he's facing some technical challenges, and he'll join us in some time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the book review, and we'll take it as it goes. I will now start sharing my screen, and I'm sorry, but if I could ask for one more confirmation when you can see the screen on the chat window. Okay. So again, I have confirmations that you were able to see the screen. So I'm going to start from there off and get right into it. Okay. So the book that I'm reviewing today is The Ride of a Lifetime. That's written by Robert Iger. Iger is the chairman of Walt Disney Company currently, and I'll get a little bit into his background eventually as we get there. However, I would also first like to begin with how I came across this book. And basically, it was a book which was reviewed at a book club in Unilever, which is where I work. And I heard a great deal from people about how effective or how impactful the book is. Concise, but with very good life lessons, professional lessons, and core values which drive leadership when it comes to big companies like Disney. And Robert Iger is known for his integrity and the values that have driven him all through his career. Also, one platform which I often refer to is the Gates Notes, which is Bill Gates' blog. And I would like to highlight what Bill Gates says on this blog, where he says that he does not read many business books because usually he feels that these books rarely capture what it really takes to build and operate an organization. However, he went ahead and read The Ride of a Lifetime. And not only did he read it himself, he also recommended it immediately to several friends and colleagues, including his good friend Satya Nadella. He basically extols Iger on how he takes you inside the workings of a massive media company. And sorry, is Sunil Uncle back?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Sorry. Sorry, Payal, to interrupt like this.
no worries.
But
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll just. I need to introduce you and have a little bit of kickstart.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for this inconvenience. Welcome all members of Baroda Book Browsers plus other guests who have tuned in to this virtual meeting of BBB. And the book, as Payal has already informed, is The Ride of a Lifetime. It's a memoir of Bob Iger, the longtime chief executive officer of Walt Disney, one of the largest, in fact, probably the largest entertainment media company in the world. Uh, I will not take much time accept to spend a few minutes and introduce Payal to the audience. Well, Payal is a young lady, chartered accountant. Uh, she is currently based in Mumbai, but whenever she was in Baroda, she would make it a point to attend our Baroda Book Browser meetings over the last so many years. She works for a multinational company, HUL, and she is in the work profile of risk and control management for Hindustan Unilever, and in particular digital transformation, financial process automation, and performance management and business intelligence. Uh, she is someone who believes in living life with lots of effervescence, and she loves what she has encapsulated in the lines of Erin Hansen, which is also my favorite byline. We all live several worlds within us, and how do we live that? Through the books and stories we read. She's very fond of reading, dancing, running, playing tennis, traveling, and whatnot. So she's a multifaceted personality. And without further ado, let me hand over to Payal. Payal, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Sunil Uncle, for that introduction. I'm sorry I jumped in because I was told you were having technical issues. And so what I'm going to do is I'll go right back to the presentation. I was speaking about the book and praise for the book across corporate world. Basically, to sum up what Bill Gates says is that it is extremely interesting insights into the workings of a media company, and very riveting details about the acquisitions that were made in the time of Bob Iger. And as we go ahead, I'll take you through the details of those. But indeed, I picked up the book, and it was a very interesting, short read, but a really good one at that. Now, coming to what I loved about the book, I myself am not very fond of business books which are very preachy or are repetitive in some form, because you reach a point of exhaustion where it all sounds the same to you. However, this book was extremely refreshing, and I'll tell you why. For starters, it's simplistic and straightforward, just like Bob Iger himself. Again, then, as I mentioned, it's a very interesting account of the biggest deals that Disney struck during the tenure of Bob Iger, which is acquisition of Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilms, which is the Star Wars fame, Fox Studios, and how he gives detailed account of the negotiations which went into those deals. Very interesting interactions with the owners of each of these companies or the people who led these companies. What I particularly loved was the description of his equation with Steve Jobs. Now, Steve Jobs is famously known to be an enigma and a person that typically people believe is very difficult to get along with. However, this book gives an intriguing account of the equation that Bob built with Steve Jobs and a lasting bond that came out of it, so much so that when there were 25 people at Steve's funeral, Bob was one of them, and that's a beautiful story told. Again, the book details out Bob's risk-taking capabilities, obviously, given the fact that he, brought through all of those acquisitions. He completely transformed Disney and its business, and he was also responsible for the launch of Disney Plus, which is the digital streaming service for Disney. And hence, it's a very interesting account of all of these. Also, something which really struck out for me was, as Sunil Uncle just mentioned, I'm a risks and controls manager for the largest FMCG of India. And I can't tell you how many crises I see and deal with on a daily basis. Add to that managing a 10-year-old at home, and there are their own set of challenges in terms of struggling with delegation, sometimes not being able to focus on the bigger picture. and often questioning, myself and my abilities. And there are some core lessons that Steve speaks about beautifully in the book, which which are not just professional corporate lessons, but they could also be life lessons in all their essence. A little bit about Bob Iger. So, as I mentioned, he's currently the chairman. He's the executive chairman and the chairman of board of directors for the Walt Disney Company. He stepped down as the CEO of Disney in February 2020, which is very recently. Now, Robert Iger, or commonly also known as Bob, made his journey from middle class Long Island background, had a father with mental illness, to running a company whose revenue is 200 plus $1 billion, and running a media empire. To give you a context of what he did at Disney, the net income of Disney rose by about 400% during the time that he led the company. He expanded the rich storytelling legacy of Disney with eye-popping multi-million-dollar acquisition deals that I just spoke of. He also saw to the opening of the first Disney park in mainland China, which is in Shanghai. And while he was at the helm of the company, a huge amount of blockbusters were released by Disney, which included the #1 movie of all time, which is the Marvel's Avengers Endgame. Also, top animated features such as Frozen and the path-breaking Black Panther, which is known to have brought about so much cultural introspection. He was also, as I mentioned, instrumental in launching Disney Plus. I would like to bring out his words that stuck with me. And he said, he's someone with particularly no unique background or intelligence, but he has been a celebrated corporate leader and arguably one of the most powerful people in business in recent times on account of sheer hard work. So that's Bob Iger. And I couldn't help pick up the book after having read about him. Now, some of the highlights for me in terms of what was the most engaging part of the book were Bob's ascent through the echelons of ABC Network, from being a lowliest crew member on a daily soap opera to then being the president of the Disney Network. He also speaks of the detailed toil of bringing the first Disney park in China, as I mentioned. And he talks about, the what did it entail in terms of collaboration with politicians, negotiating land deals, managing labor laws, as well as cultural imperialism. Then he also speaks of the ailing Disney animation because of a string of box office flops, which led to a general public loss of faith in Disney animation, and then how he goes about salvaging it with the acquisition of Pixar. Of course, the acquisitions and details of the acquisitions stand out. As I spoke about his equation with Steve Jobs, he speaks about it and navigating business transactions with him, extremely interesting. Then he speaks of launching Disney Plus and the hard decisions that he took in course of that. And like I said, the core values which stand out for me. So getting into the book, it starts with a captivating prologue. And there couldn't have been a more apt beginning to the tumultuous journey of Bob Iger as the CEO of Disneyland. Now, to give you a context of what life entails when you are helming a company like that, he speaks about the toil that went into building Disneyland in Shanghai. And hence, to give you a context, about 18 years to build, about 963 acres in size, which is 11 times the size of Disneyland. It took $6 billion to build, and about 14,000 workers were involved in its construction at any given point of time. So you can imagine that this was an extremely momentous endeavor for Disney. While Bob was in Shanghai for the launch of this park, there were some parallel unfortunate events which unfolded in US. One was a mass shooting in an Orlando nightclub, which was in close proximity of Disney premises. premise, which he also discovered that the initial target for the mass shooting was a Disney property. In fact, the shooter had scouted that property, and because of heavy security on that day, he did not go ahead with it. And as if that was not enough, there was another incident where a small child, a 2-year-old child, lost his life on a Disney property due to an alligator attack. And the eventual scampering after all of or both of these events to track the well-being of the Disney employees, and also his emotional quagmire of reaching out to the child's parents to express grief and giving a media statement wherein he would need to be empathetic. He was extremely heartbroken, but at the same time not invite legal liabilities for the company. He speaks so beautifully about keeping emotions at bay. While putting things in context, where on one hand they were creating magic for all those kids in China, and on the other hand, it was the saddest day of his career, given that a child lost his life on his property. This is where he speaks about balancing emotions at the same time of compartmentalization, where he says that you need to recognize that there are drop everything events, and there are others where you say to yourself, this is serious, I need to be engaged right now, but I also need to extricate myself and focus on some things which I need to, and later get back to this. He speaks about his intrinsic faith in the people that worked for him, which is so important when you're leading a giant-sized company like Disney, where he said that in certain events you need to know that you may not have anything to add, and hence you shouldn't wade in. At the same time, trust your people to do their jobs and focus your energies on the other pressing issues. Now, basically, running Disney and all of the 200,000 plus employees that they have worldwide and businesses spread across, disasters and events like these are bound to unfortunately strike at some point or the other. And he speaks about what it takes, which is, in his words, a quirky brain chemistry, instinctive defense mechanism, and reliance on an internal threat scale. Wherein he sums up saying that what people see on the outside so often doesn't reflect what's happening on the inside. So much of that also reflects his own journey as the head of the company that creates magic and rather happiness. At the outset of the book, he lays down certain principles which he calls as principles which nurture the good and manage the bad. And I specifically wanted to spend some time on these because I was speaking about it earlier. There are so many lessons that he sums up which are equally important wherever you are. He speaks of optimism and the fact that pragmatic enthusiasm of what can be achieved in face of difficult choices and less than ideal outcomes is extremely important. Then he speaks of courage and the necessity to take risk when it's essential, because as we all know, businesses are ever changing and disrupted so rapidly in current times, and it's so important. Then he speaks about focus, which all of us at some point or the other kind of try to navigate, wherein allocating time, energy, and resources to the problems or the projects of highest importance. Then he speaks about decisiveness, something that really struck close to my heart, where he says, decisions even does not really help anyone. Of course, curiosity, which enables discovery of people, ideas, and so on, which is the first, or rather the birthstone of any journeys that you make in disruptions. He speaks of fairness. He's known to be an extremely fair person, and hence talks about empathy, accessibility, recognition that honest mistakes need to be forgiven. Then he speaks about thoughtfulness, which he says is the most underrated element of good leadership. Completely resonates. Again, then authenticity, the importance of being genuine and not being fake at any point, no matter whether you're leading a company or in the middle rungs or the lower rungs. And then he speaks about perfection, and everybody knows him for his relentless pursuit of perfection. Um, and again, I would like to quote him where he says, "If you're in the business of making things, be in the business of making things great." And of course, last but not the least, integrity, wherein he says the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And yeah, so these principles really stick with you. They set the right tone to the book and the journey. Now, to get into how the book is structured, it is basically divided into two parts. One is learning, which speaks about Robert Iger's journey as learning and rising through the corporate ladder. And then he speaks about leading, where he is leading Disney for 15 years, and all of the decisions he takes in the leadership role. Now, at the outset, he actually points out that this is not a memoir, and it's more a description of his professional journey and the traits that served him well over the course of time. Um, to give you a perspective, 45 years in a media company, 15 years as the CEO of Disney, 14 bosses. So you can imagine the kind of experience he must have gathered, starting as a weatherman and a local news reporter in a local channel, and then joining as an assistant on a daytime soap opera at ABC, and then coming to the point where he runs Disney. And it's a very vivid encounter of the ride of a lifetime. And why he calls it the ride of a lifetime. Basically, according to him, it's the happiest job. And why not? It's the job of making movies, television shows, Broadway musicals, games, costumes, toys, as you may, building theme parks, cruises, rides, hotels, and so on. And he speaks in detail about what it entails to do this job in terms of plotting growth strategy with investors, or designing giant theme parks, or working with the famous Disney Imagineers, in order to build all of the creative assets of the company. So that's basically what the book is divided into. When we speak about learning, it talks about the rise of Robert Iger and where he started at the bottom. They're very brief sections of the book where he talks about his personal life and influences of his father. And as I mentioned, his father was dealing with manic depression. So the emotional unpredictability that came with it, its impact on Bob. He brings out that his father was a brilliant and a complicated man who gave him the love for reading books and generally knowing about the world. However, when he speaks about his own inclinations, he talks about the fact that he did not have any passion for academics, but he was determined to work hard, not wanting to experience the same sense of failure as his father. Serve him well in his career have rather been influences from his father directly or indirectly. Again, the fact that having an unstable father required him to be kind of a steady center for the family since early childhood. And he says that it is these things which serve you in life, such as there are some things that he learned, like waking up early, very early. He's known to rise at 4:15 every morning to start his day. And the invaluable time that you have to yourself. And then he speaks about the tolerance for monotony and the learned reaction to anxiety, all of which came through his childhood experiences. The book doesn't speak a lot about his academics or places where he might have studied, but it talks about the odd jobs that he picked up, like shoveling snow when he was in 8th grade, or babysitting, or cleaning heaters in classrooms, and actually cleaning gums from the bottom of the desks, and making pizza at a local Pizza Hut. after which he, of course, joined ABC and rose through that entire organization. And there's some important lessons that he speaks about when he talks about his career and his rise at ABC. And some of those are, when he says that some people work best when their ego is least threatened, and you need to master the art of moving people over to your side and enlisting their enthusiastic engagement. Striking a balance in when you would want to patiently respond to their concerns, and when at the same time you would like to assert that it's you are the leader and you take the calls eventually. Then we enter into the whole Disney era of Robert Iger, and when he comes to this section of the book, he is acquired, which is the trepidation of being acquired by Disney, and how he navigated the cultural differences of the two organizations. Disney was known to be very centralized, bureaucratic. ABC was least interference. He also speaks about kind of keeping people motivated, because people were feeling that change and when that whole transition happened. Then he goes on to talk about a very dispiriting and unproductive career phase in his life, where he speaks of multiple times when he's passed over for the top jobs. And at a time when he was about to become the CEO of ABC, he was now asked to run Disney's media division. Again, he had a lot of hot and cold equation with the then CEO of Disney, who was very reluctant to pass the baton, and describes it as a land grab of authority and blurring of boundaries and responsibilities at Disney. This is what he calls a very dispiriting time in his career. And there's a point of time in the book where he comes to know through someone that the CEO of Disney had said that he would never pass on, or he never saw Bob Iger succeeding him at the leadership position at Disney, which came almost 25 years after his first boss had told him in 1975 that he was not promotable. There was inconsistent behavior, and 4 weeks after having said that, the CEO again asked him to help him run the company. Navigating all of these is what he talks about, and he ultimately becomes the president and CEO and board of Disney, or member of the Disney board. Very succinctly, he also talks about managing, conflicting work priorities with personal life. He speaks of his grooming moments, where he's learning the tricks of the trade, which not just involve running networks, but also the nuances of running a Disney park. And one of the most important lessons he speaks of is the ability to see the big picture, as well as the granular details at the same time, and consider how one affects the other. In the book, there is also a very, very engaging description of Imagineering, which is the creative and technical heart of Disney. And all of the theme parks and cruises and costumes and castles or design of their hotels, everything emanates from Imagineering. And these people, they are artists, they are engineers, they are architects, technologists, and they fulfill a role that is unmatched anywhere else in the world. And he speaks about his own encounter with that place. He also speaks about all of the troubles that Disney went through in terms of there were these struggles at the top leadership of the company. As I mentioned, there were box office failures. The board of directors were now noticing that the CEO was not able to lead the company well. Then there was the sinking ratings of ABC, and he speaks of the ripple effects of the 9/11 attacks, where because of a global slowdown in tourism, Disney's revenues were really badly hit, and they lost nearly a quarter of their value within days. Also, a hostile bid by Comcast to take over the company. And basically, it is in this turmoil that the CEO stepped down and created an opportunity for Bob Iger which obviously was not going to be an easy journey going ahead. And he also speaks of the arduous 6-month process in the run up to his appointment as the CEO, where there was publicly expressed opinion that he was not capable of taking up the job. All of this resulted in an anxiety attack, which he felt at the time was a heart attack, and put things into perspective in terms of how much of a stress all of that had been. Which is when he also speaks about a hard earned lesson, where he says the importance of tenacity and perseverance, and also the need to, stay clear or steer clear of anger and anxiety over things that you can't control. All of these are so beautifully put forward. But then he eventually, went on to become the CEO of Disney. So I quickly browsed through the mergers and acquisitions that he led and what were the highlights of those. When he came to the helm of Disney, he actually put forward 3 priorities for the company. And these priorities were the need to devote time and capital to the creation of high quality branded content. The second was embracing technology to the fullest extent, by enabling creation of higher quality products and reaching consumers in more modern and relevant ways. And then the need to become a truly global company, because Disney needed to better penetrate in markets, particularly those which were populous countries like China and India. So those were the priorities that he set forth, and it is these priorities which actually guided his acquisitions. And when you go through the book, you realize how it all fit in within the priorities that he had set at the beginning of his journey as CEO. His first big acquisition was Pixar, and as I spoke of the mess that Disney was in, what Iger realized was that at a point of time they had spent 400, or rather they had spent well over $1 billion in making some of the movies, which lost them $400 million, and the return on investment were very poor. And this is when he actually gathered the courage to do something which was unthinkable. Was to approach Steve Jobs to acquire Pixar. And Steve had a very acrimonious relationship with Disney because he had a fallout with the previous CEO, and he was not known to be a person who would easily let go of emotions like that. He speaks about navigating that equation and winning Steve over with a very straightforward, no nonsense kind of approach. He obviously got Steve on board, which is when he floated it to the Disney board. Again, a lot of naysayers, thought it was outrageous, too risky. However, he then speaks about, dealing with the entire board and the staff at Pixar and kind of giving them assurance that their culture would be maintained, including the logo would be maintained, and navigating emotions more than anything else. And eventually, he was able to finalize that deal at about $7.4 billion. One of the things that stood out during this entire phase was the heart-wrenching encounter that he narrates when Steve comes and confides into him about the relapse of his cancer and facing his impending death minutes before they were about to make the announcement. And the spontaneous decision that Robert took to still go ahead with the deal, given that Steve was about to become their largest shareholder and member of the board, and in the face of that ominous news, to be able to decide what should be the right call. He sums it up with saying that people sometimes shy away from taking big swings because they assess the odds and build a case against trying something before they even take the first step. And he believes that the long shots are usually not as long as they seem. Then, going kind of navigating the whole thing, the person who ran Marvel was an enigma. Ike Perlmutter, they did not know much about him. He was ex-Israel military, and he was extremely reclusive and a mystery, and it took them about 6 months to even get a meeting with him. From there on to navigating this deal, the due diligence that went into it, they prepared a dossier of about 7,000 Marvel characters, and then all of the being able to close the deal, and at the same time then speaks about all of the releases that happened post over, or rather buying Marvel, and talks about how much those box office receipts gross. He also speaks about the Black Panther and Chadwick Boseman, and this was a time where he again took a very, very revolutionary step, which was at a time when there was a strong belief that Black hero led movies, or with a cast of color, the movie will not strike a chord either with the movie goers or internationally. And he had to do a lot of convincing to go ahead with that project, which turned out to be the fourth highest grossing superhero film of all time. And he speaks about the experience of being a part of the premiere of Black Panther as being one of the most memorable moments of his career. And the responses that got for him were Denzel Washington, Gail King, President Obama, Oprah Winfrey, they all reached out to him for what an incredible job he had done. And in Oprah's words, it made her tear up to think that little Black children will grow up with that forever. So that was Disney with Marvel. Then he briefly speaks about acquiring Lucasfilms of the Star Wars fame. Again, George Lucas, a difficult person to navigate. The whole Star Wars was a legacy for him, and he had actually famously said that his obituary should read Star Wars creator George Lucas. So, kind of negotiating with him, it was not a business negotiation, but a negotiation to be the keeper of a legacy. And how he dealt with it, and then the release of The Force Awakens, which is the first Star Wars film from Disney's stable. And while he speaks about all of these acquisitions, he talks about the fact that the common thread of the purchases for all of these was the fact that each of these deals depended on building a trust with a single controlling entity. And the personal components of these deals was what would make or break that entire negotiation. He also then speaks about acquisition of Fox, his engagements with Rupert Murdoch, coming to a point where you've acquired so many assets, and then you kind of think that if I have to erase the history and build it all over again and reorganize it with all of the varied businesses and people, how would you do it? And how he analyzes the business, puts his movies, television, sports, apps, physical entertainment and goods in different blocks, and decides to restructure, putting the right people at the right place. At the same time, he also speaks about a transformation not only in Disney, but also a social change which came about. And everybody is well too aware of the Me Too movement. And, at that point of time, people were held accountable for the behavior, and the media companies are known to be kind of affected the most. At a point of time, John Lasseter, who was the CEO of Disney Animation, and John Skipper, who was the president of ESPN, one was accused of inappropriate sexual behavior, mired in a drug problem. And at a point when he had made so many acquisitions, he actually let them go. He lost two of the most critical leaders of his organization. However, he, very succinctly says that there's no price for integrity, and hence those calls need to be taken. Again, a very, very interesting encounter of how Disney Plus was launched and what went into it. And he speaks about the fact that, when you are at a point where you are going to enter into a business of the future, by actually causing short-term losses, it's a very difficult decision to make. And, all of the Disney assets were generating a healthy stream of revenue across Netflix or Amazon. deciding to pull them off and losing licensing fees, and then exclusively showcasing them on Disney streaming services. And the whole idea of cannibalizing their own business in terms of the ABC television. He speaks about all of that, and it's impressive. The kind of decisions that went into making this thing possible. Um, when it comes to an end, he is basically reflecting on the fact that he's stepping down. He will resign, or rather his new retirement date has been set by Disney as December 2021. And he speaks of a time when the ride needs to come to an end, also recognizing that future that he so feverishly planned will unfold without him being a part of it. There's some important things that he speaks about where he says that you can sometimes accumulate so much power in a job that it becomes difficult to keep a check on how you wield it. He also says that it's important to consciously make sure that you are not being dismissive or impatient because you've heard it all, done it all, and you don't have the patience to kind of go through the daily rigors of the job. And then he speaks about his thoughts on leaving the company in good hands and with a great legacy. And he speaks about the fact that this was a ride of a lifetime, which involved bringing the world happiness, entertainment, and a sense of well-being, something that it truly needs. The book ends with a summation of all the lessons that he learned over the course of his career. And I have just put some of those on the slides here, some of those which I felt were really, really kind of standing out for me. He speaks about the value of ability more than experience, and putting people in roles that require more of them than they know they have in them. He's known to have put the right people in the right place and then giving them the freedom to operate, which is how his success has come about. He also speaks about a very important thing where he says, avoid getting into the business of manufacturing trombone oil. You may become the greatest trombone oil manufacturer in the world, but in the end, the world only consumes a few quarts of trombone oil a year. Basically, meaning that focus on projects that really matter. And I don't think all of his journey would have been possible without his innate ability to do that. He also speaks about he's extremely against pessimism. He's a highly optimistic person. He talks about how pessimism leads to paranoia, which leads to defensiveness, and that leads to risk aversion. And he also talks about the fact that treating others with respect is an undervalued currency when it comes to negotiating. No wonder he was able to negotiate deals which were thought to be impossible, and it all boiled down to the fact about how he treated people and how he respected them. Some of the others being, it's not good to have power for too long. You don't realize the way your voice seems to boom louder than every other voice in the room. All of us are in power position point or the other, and keeping that in check is so important, which is what he speaks about at all points in the book. He also says, don't be in the business of playing it safe. Be in the business of creating possibilities for greatness. And the greatness that he created, the acquisitions, or the digital transformation of Disney and the D2C business of Disney, given where we are today. And I'm sure, he couldn't have foreseen the pandemic. But I recognize the fact that it was such an important and significant decision that he made, which must have stood them. Obviously, we all know the troubles that Disney is going through or has gone through. But still, given the times right now, I think it was a huge decision that must have saved him, because there is no theaters, no movies getting released, and having a digital platform is so critical for a company like that. Their parks are shut down, for a long time. And then he also speaks about the fact that a lot of companies acquire others without much sensitivity. And he says that they think that they are acquiring physical assets or intellectual property, but usually what they are acquiring is people. And it's this sense of Robert Iger which actually made all of his accomplishments possible. So yeah, that brings me to the end of it. And so Neelam, I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Payal, for riding this virtual meeting through the entire book with clarity, competence, and giving the essential contours of the book, and the vivid description that the author has very frankly, in a down to earth manner, put across, in various species through the book. So this was a very precise, very concise review. And two things I would like to add. Of course, you have already covered in the passing. uh, Bob Iger obviously was not a great academic achiever. In fact, he confesses that academics was not one of his great passions, nor was he great about it. But yet he has made it to the top of one of the finest organizations in the world, and highly regarded as one of the best chief executives around. One thing which he mentioned, and I think Payal covered it, in the lessons to learn, uh, put people in roles that require more of them than what they have in them. I think this is very important in order to enable anyone to achieve and explore the full range of potential that he has. He should be given an enabling environment whereby he's pushed to underpin his potentials. That is one thing. And secondly, about when is the time to retire and when is the time to go off the power throne. Very rightly he put it that if in the meeting room your own voice has louder echo than that of the others, while you may not realize, but there is a very discerning sign available to know that you are not contributing enough in the meeting. So that is the time when one should. I think it's time for many people to realize when to hand over the baton to others. So apart from that, all the aspects that she has wonderfully covered, and on behalf of Baroda Book Browsers, I'm very thankful to Payal for carrying out, sparing time in midst of several roles that she juggles, not only as a professional person but also as a homemaker and family person. And that speaks volumes of the Indian ladies and the ladies of modern times. So now is the time to take two questions. Let me go through them. Yeah, uh, that's how. One is from Tailab Shah. In fact, he's endorsing one of the traits of Bob Iger. One common thing among the most successful people is that they all are early risers. Yes, absolutely correct. Then Tailab asks, does he talk about the success and planning process at Disney? Payal, would you like to take this?
Yeah, so basically he
Hello.
doesn't get into,
Yeah.
yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay. So basically, he
Yeah, yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
get
yeah.
into the details of succession planning. He does talk about the importance of leaving the legacy in good hands. However, given the unfolding of events, we know that Bob Chapek is being currently trained to take over. And Bob Iger has continued as an executive chairman in order to make sure that that transition is smooth. So the book doesn't very specifically talk about the succession planning, but at various points of time, it does talk about the importance of stepping down at the right time and passing on the baton at the right time as well.
Correct. Yeah. Then there are a lot of compliments in the remarks. This one is from Sagar Mehta. Has he talked about CSR done by Disney, say percentage of profit? Let me tell you, Sagar, CSR is an Indian concept, but anyway, Payal, please take it up. What it means is that corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, yeah,
Payal,
no,
can
no,
you
yeah, no,
pitch
he
it?
doesn't speak about it. And while he talks about the fact that he believed in championing diversity and kind of human rights, but specifically about CSR, he doesn't talk about in the book.
Then this one is from Rajiv Jain, and he's asking you, Payal, do you find any resemblance of Bob with any Indian CEO or owner?
Oh wow. um,
Payal?
yeah, I'm just thinking. I don't know, maybe to a certain extent, you know, if the first thing that comes to my mind is the Tatas, Ratan Tata, or maybe Narayan Murthy, given the integrity. But honestly, no, the amount of transformation that he brought about and the digitalization of the whole company, one man, 15 years, no, impossible to draw a parallel in the Indian corporate ranks. I don't know. So, Neelangal, can you think of anyone?
Yeah, well, in terms of transformation and innovative ability and all, yes, there may be some few, Indians who would have, under the Indian circumstances, done quite well. But if I have to, point out or, make mention of a standout CEO in the current generation who is relatively young, my vote goes for Rajiv Bajaj, because I find him to be very, very clear, very humble, and the way he connects with his people, and the transparency with which he deals. Probably some traits of Bob can be found in Rajiv Bajaj. That's my choice, but that's how I feel it. Thank you. But Payal, let me also add here one thing. You mentioned about and in fact, it is there in the book. He has devoted several pages about the emotional condition of his father. He was manic depressive, very brilliant chap, but somehow not able to reconcile with the realities, and he was not able to connect with people well, and therefore he used to have frequent bouts of frustrations. Probably, this man Bob, he was a very precocious child. Payal, you would agree with me. With the way in which in the earlier part of the book he has described about how in the early childhood, when he knew about the tantrums of his father, and when he is in the first floor of that corner room for himself, and his father would come and on, and how he would be alert and how he would handle the tantrums of his father. Probably that has helped him in later part in his life with to deal and connect with people of different temperament, different talents and all, retaining his emotional quotient. I think that would have helped him a lot, especially in some major inorganic expansions and acquisitions. This is what I feel. What do you feel, Payal?
I agree. I agree. All through the book, you come to know how mercurial people can be, and specifically in the media industry. And in fact, I was at one point of time listening to an interview that Oprah had done with Bob Iger, and they spoke about having somebody with a manic depression in the family. And Bob actually said that they become so instinctive that even the sound of their footsteps or the way they turn a doorknob will actually make them realize what mood they would be in. I think all of this grounding and being able to manage this at such a young age. Obviously, for some people it doesn't transpire to greatness, but for him it did. And the amount of calm he maintains throughout his life,
Hello. 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 Can you hear me? Hello. Hello. It seems Payal has lost the connect in this meeting. And if I may be allowed to continue, uh, there have been a lot of compliments from across the participants for excellent review and the vivid description that have been associated with this book review. So on behalf of everyone, Payal, let me once again thank you and request you to continue to have interest in Baroda Book Browser's activities. And in the coming months and years, we look forward to your reviews at BBB. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry, I had some network issues, so dropped off.
Yeah. Now you are back, so you can continue from that. Yeah, please do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know when I dropped off, but I was saying, the ability to navigate different temperaments and the mercurial behaviors of the media industry. I'm sure a lot of his childhood, experience with his father would have helped him build that competence.
Correct. Yeah, there have been a lot of compliments and a lot of good words for you, Payal, for this excellent effort. But one person from whom you got the great comments, I must not forget, and that's your son, Arya. He says incredible review. So my request to Arya is that please give your mom a big hug on behalf of all of us for the wonderful job she has done. So Arya has mentioned incredible presentation. So I'm sure. So you must have made him feel proud, as also your husband and also your parents. So keep it up. Thank you for your interest in Baroda Book Browser activities and programs, and I look forward to your continuing involvement. With that note, let me give a parting message to all the participants. Well, we are at the fag end of 2020. This is the last book review meeting of 2020, and what a year has been. When in 2019 December we have had a meeting, physical meeting, I never realized that almost all future meetings of 2020 will be virtual meetings. How things have changed, absolutely unexpected. And, it has changed the way, we look at life. Pandemic, COVID-19 has altered our, outlook towards life. With this remark, I wish everyone a very happy incoming year 2021 with a fervent hope that the pandemic mahamari will recede very fast and will help us get back to our normal lives very soon. Thank you. Have a nice remainder Sunday, and until we meet next time on virtual platform in January, goodbye to all. Thank you. Thank you, Payal, and thank you, everyone. The meeting is concluded.